Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the 2021 Veterans Wellbeing Summit. On behalf of the Veterans Benevolent Fund, my fellow directors and over 170 RSL and services clubs that we represent, we are extremely proud to be supporting such an important initiative once again this year. Since 2015, our clubs and the VBF have been able to fund over $1.7 million in projects that directly support veterans and their families. Projects like Homes for Heroes, Disaster Relief Australia, Wounded Heroes, Defence Community Dogs, Spur Horse Trek, The Last Post, a First Nations inclusion project, Swiss 8 and the Veterans Centre Sydney Northern Beaches. Your summit and the key themes of action, hope and transformation continue to resonate with the VBF and our objectives to ensure that our funds go directly to our ex-servicemen and women when they need it the most. Congratulations and all the best for another successful summit.
So welcome, I'm here with two of my co-directors from Wellbeing Australia, our chair Donna Newbury and Catherine Taylor. And we thought this is probably a good opportunity as part of the launch to talk about what it is that, well, what is Wellbeing Australia and what it is that we do, and also to talk about some of the finer points in terms of the work that we have been doing in veteran wellbeing with the Veteran Wellbeing Summit. So Donna, I'd hand over to you to say hello and introduce yourself, but also to talk a little bit about Wellbeing Australia and what it is that we do.
Fabulous. Thanks, Jackie. And hi, everybody. As Jackie said, I've been with Wellbeing Australia now for probably about 6 years, and really thrilled to be here and welcome to the Veterans Wellbeing Summit. I guess a couple of things I would just say about Wellbeing Australia. For those of you who may not know the organisation very well, we're not for profit. And we focus really on helping people proactively manage their well-being. So that makes us quite different from, I guess, many of the other groups out there that do fabulous work in dealing with you when you're in a crisis or in a difficult position. But we really see our role and saw a opportunity in the market to really focus on how do you get ahead of that? How do you get people who are coping or otherwise well, but in very stressful situations or jobs, etc., to learn the proactive ways that they can manage their well-being so that they don't have to wait till they're in a crisis. And I think, certainly for veterans, that's a really important part of it, both while you're actually in active service, but once you become a veteran and are post-active service, it's just hygiene maintenance of, how do you manage your well-being and know what parts of your well-being are critically important to your state of mind and your outlook.
Thanks, Don. And I think what Don's pointed out there too is that we're not a provider.
No,
we do create these and run these events to showcase people and organisations who are providers and doing amazing work and not necessarily well known. So we do have quite a diverse range of people who present at our workshops and online events. Catherine, you've been involved obviously for a long time. You actually got me into Wellbeing Australia, so I blame you. In terms of because you've also been a host for a couple of our sessions that we ran last year, the year before, and I think there was a different energy, wasn't there, in the type of conversations?
Yeah, and look, I see it from a personal perspective as well. My daughters grew up in a defence school, a school that had 60% Defence Force families, and so I think something that we've really focused on is breaking down those silos of I'm in service or out of service. I'm one person or another, and trying to help people find their feet with who they are and where they are, but also bringing in the families. And those conversations that we were having in the first summit, but also in the subsequent summits, the thing I noticed was just the call for normal, natural conversations of, hey, I'm really struggling with that. That's me. I'm really not sure what that looks like or feels like, but it sounds like me, right? And that conversation in a number of key topics that are often sort of disguised or hidden. I sort of feel sometimes the media cover it in their own way for what they want, but our focus is really helping people heal. And so the conversations and the energy that's come from our speakers, but also from our audiences, has been very much about wow, that worked for me, and it may work for you, or it may work for your family, or it may work for, you know, those people around you. And I think that's been really powerful. And I think each year we see that flow on of that conversation and the impact of that continuing the conversation instead of thinking, here's a Band-Aid and everything's magically better.
Yeah, that's so true. I think the idea that you can have a wellbeing platform that's one size fits all, I think it's so evident that that's not the case. So what works for me may not work for you. And what you were saying there is people being able to pick up bits and pieces and go, well, yep, you know what, that resonates with me, or hey, that's my family that they're talking about, is probably the good thing about having such a diverse range of presenters, is that you can actually get all of that in.
And an engaged format, Jackie. I think that it's like live and online, obviously on demand as well, but that ability where we've had people share their comments before or during or after sessions, that's something you don't get in those one size fits all sort of wellbeing tick box models. This is wellbeing, as Don said, is not this is what you do and magically you're better. And so I think that engagement we've had before, during and after has really informed us of what people are wanting, but also what's working.
Mm-hmm. And I think also to piggyback on that is the whole idea that, you know, as well-being, it's a journey. It's not a one size fits all, and it's also not a static thing. So as you grow and change and move through different phases of your life, as a veteran, as a parent, as anybody, so your well-being needs may change. But what's so great is the fact that, as Catherine says, it's informal chats and conversations, but also it's focused on the solutions rather than the issues. And I think what that's done is help to normalize the conversations a lot more, so that, you know, I look back at the first Veterans Wellbeing Summit, it was much more about sort of formally bringing up these topics, whereas it feels like they're so much part of everyday conversation now in veterans wellbeing. It's becoming more normalized to be discussing wellbeing issues.
And the diversity of ideas, Don, that being able to have that, well, hang on, there are so many things happening and I don't know what's happening unless I start to hear about those things. And some of the things we've been talking about, a lot of the attendees were saying, I never even knew this was a thing, right? So it's that being able to have access without having to feel vulnerable, without having to put yourself somewhere you don't know or is difficult for you to get to, or the timing doesn't work, all of those sorts of things, which is life, or you're just not having a good day. Yeah, sometimes we've had people who have dialed in and they just weren't in the right space at that time, but they dialed back in later and they might have dialed in with friends or family or something, and they found that was what worked for them. And I think the flexibility of our approach of giving ideas and options is something that we've heard a lot back from people in terms of what works.
I agree. I think the other thing that's so critical is it's almost like you get a little bit of a taste of various people. So just on one topic, for example, like post-traumatic stress disorder, is that you can see 5 or 6 different styles and people, from psychologists to peer mentors to coaches to all different sort of approaches. And as we well know, well-being, it's so critical that you have chemistry and click with the person who's supporting you through that. And that's been amazing to me. People have really resonated with one speaker over another just based on purely personal. So I think that's been great, is that people have been able to really not say, all right, well, I've got to go see a psychologist and this is the only path and the medical model. That's the path that I have to follow, and I've only got this psychologist. I've never been to anyone else, or I haven't got any other choice. Whereas here, in terms of the person, even if it's a psychologist, you've been exposed to a lot of psychologists in the area, and you might think, oh, this one works better for me. I relate more easily to what they're saying. But also, it may not be a psychologist. It might be more of a lifestyle coach or somebody outside of the medical model that works for you. So it's really about customizing it for you and giving people the options to choose what works for them.
You mentioned medical model, and I was actually going to say exactly that, that the solutions don't necessarily need to be medical ones, and that, not to say that there aren't cases or situations that require that, there certainly are, but people are finding their own path and taking responsibility and agency by exploring a whole lot of different options. Now, I think what is really interesting is that people are engaging in conversations and taking responsibility for their own well-being, which is what we've always been about. But it's so clear, though, that this is what people have wanted all along, that they've wanted to be the masters of their own domain, to make the choices themselves, not to have well-being done to them, to actually be part of that co-design and selecting what it is that works for them. And maybe they might try a whole lot of different things. And, maybe, 4 out of the 5, there's minimal, yeah, it was a nice experience, but it hasn't actually had any lasting impacts. But there is one that has had some significant impact for them, and that's what they explore for a period of time, until such time as they might want to look at something else and try something else.
So true, Jackie. And it's that if it didn't work, it's not the end. I think that's something that's really important, because often we feel, particularly with traditional medical models, oh, they've said I'm in a really bad place. This is going to take me, and we've heard this a lot from the veterans, this is going to take me a long time to recover, which is great that medic has that insight to provide their perspective and what's involved in that. But for some people, that's quite daunting, and that's quite overwhelming of, my gosh, I'm not going to get past this. So being able to have that alongside other things and be able to try something and go, that didn't work for me. That just didn't work for me. And also for families and friends who are trying to have conversation around suicide and other things like that, well, there's new ideas for how I can approach things where I tried it, but I didn't feel like I got there, or I didn't feel that worked for me. And I think that's been really important, is that not feeling there's this finite, I didn't get it and so I can't be helped, or this is my life as it stands and I will never recover or move forward from this. I think that hope is actually really critical, that there has been a lot of evidence of people finding hope because of that sudden understanding that it's not going to be one thing.
Yeah.
You're so right, Catherine. And I think it's also not necessarily just one thing at a time, or over your life. So it may actually accelerate your improvement in terms of the medical model if you're adding in some of the peer support and other aspects to it that really accelerate your progress. So it's not that you have to choose one or the other, as we said before. I think they've all got a critically important place, but it's the combination and the timing and the balance that's up to the person and their family to choose, rather than somebody else who doesn't know them and their situation.
Yeah, I think what I liked about it was each session has built on providing the language for people to ask the right questions, so that they, thank you for giving me the language or giving me the words, or yes, that's me, but I've never been able to articulate it. So that's one thing that I found has been stunning in its consistency across every iteration that we've done so far. And the other thing too that it says becoming glaringly obvious is that for complex and complicated problems, the solutions are actually sometimes very, very simple, and sometimes have nothing to do with the issue that they want to have dealt with. So, simple lifestyle choices, getting more exercise, engaging with exercise physiology, diet, taking up, say, some different sorts of leisure activities. All of those sorts of things have actually been proving to be far more valuable for people, and something that they've got total control over. They can actually control all of that themselves, and making those choices. They just needed the encouragement and perhaps a bit of a framework to get started, and that's been quite exciting to see.
Something I to lead on from that, and Don, you touched on this before, I feel the speakers that we've had, because we are not, there's no fees, agencies, we don't purchase people, it's nothing like that where we're pushing forward. So the people we've had speaking are very honest, very raw, very vulnerable in sharing their journeys, their experiences, their knowledge of, and that really didn't work for me because of this, but this did work, and you've got your own set of what's going to work or not. But that the honesty, and I think the candor in being able to engage in conversations and be able to provide their own experiences in their own world as much as those that they're connected to. That ongoing sort of flow, I think, has been quite key, because it does help us to feel like, well, hang on, there is this continuation.
So I think, any last words, Donna?
No, I just, thank you to our sponsors for allowing us to host these every year. And, thank you, Jackie, for leading this, because I think it's providing a platform for so many, as we've discussed, experts in this area to get known by people who might benefit from their services. And also, I think, what's so critical and what I'm so proud of is that it focuses on all four aspects of well-being. And so many people ask us, what is well-being? You've spoken about the physical side, but then there's also the emotional, what we've, I think, experienced so big, in such a big way this last year, is the impact of lack of social engagement and well-being. But then there's also the spiritual. And I think it's that full rounded 360 of well-being that's so critical. So thank you to our sponsors and the people, the committee, and people that have enabled us to continue this great work, and hopefully for much longer into the future.
Yep. Thank you, Donna. And yes, and our sponsors and partners have been extremely generous again. So we are providing this at no cost to our participants and to speakers. The other thing too is that we don't get paid for this other than in hugs and coffee, and also too. But I think that the knowledge and the very real evidence is this is helping people in their lives individually, but also families and partners is. It's what motivates us. It's the reason why we got involved in the very first place. So thank you, Donna. Thank you, Catherine, for sharing this little bit of the launch. And we look forward to seeing everybody online in the events that are starting this week. And obviously, we've got other weeks and activities throughout the year. But this is the official launch, and you're all very welcome, and we love having you with us. Thank you.